you're being lied to. We are in the crisis mode right now, an inflection point right now. Like, I think it's as important as any time in Bitcoin's history. Every time you put some shit on the Bitcoin blockchain, you are burdening a future generation without their permission. We're going to have to fight for what we want. It will be a battle. We are building an escape pod. We are building a way to get the fuck out of this system. That's why you should be stacking your Bitcoin like a psychopath. There's going to be a pinprick. And that money will flow into Bitcoin, the hardest asset on earth. You can have so much wealth in the future going forward that you can step outside that system permanently. If I'm right, that's $1 million a coin. Someday, somebody's going to be standing in my studio here. They're going to go, hey, I'm too late. I missed it. You know what? I'm going to look around and say, you're right. Yeah, you did. You fucking missed it. It kind of feels almost like we're in an inflection point right now. Like, if I were to describe this moment, I think it's as important as any time in Bitcoin's history. I think it's as important as the block size wars. I think it's as important as getting through the ICO period and all the shitcoinery that went around in that period. It's like, it's funny because I'm having a reset, and it came from Prague when I was over in Prague. And the reset has to do with like getting back to Bitcoin basics. That's what it is. And I'm going to be getting more toxic, more of a toxic maxi. I'm more of a hardcore Bitcoin maxi. And I'm not talking about toxic as far as dealing with other human beings. I'm going to try to keep my New Year's resolution and not do a lot of ad hominem attacks or anything of that nature, but just the general honey badger, kick-ass kind of a tough armor that we're going to need going forward. So it's just been an interesting time.
I couldn't agree more, George. I mean, there's so many things going on. There's infighting inside the Bitcoin community. There's, the world is watching Bitcoin. And even on top of all that, we are in an echo chamber to a degree where it's only 2 trillion of 1 quadrillion of assets in the world. We are still so incredibly early. But like you said, it feels like it's an inflection point where, and Saylor said this before, the most important part about Bitcoin, the thing that scares me the most is probably a better way to say it, is, do people care about sound money? Do people care about their freedom in essence? Do they, the story of life to a degree is people like having leaders. They like having kings. They like being told what to do. That's kind of like human nature to a degree. And here we are. Do we want our own freedom? Do we have a republic? Can we keep it? Can we govern ourselves? Can we self-govern ourselves? Well, we are about to find out.
If you want to look back at history and realize that history is an endless saga of continuous combat. And I mean, you can look back all the way to the Sumerian Empire in Mesopotamia, because at that point we had written history. This is about 3,500 years ago. And they record the various kings across the kingdom and the various power struggles. And it is nonstop conflict. And every one of those kings, every one of those empires has attempted to subjugate their people, often through the use of money. And right now you have to realize that we are building an escape pod. We are building a way to get the fuck out of this system. And if we're going to get out of this system, we got to work for it. We got to fight for it. This is not going to be some easy moment where we just glide along and institutions come along and the U.S. government comes along and everybody welcomes us on board. We're going to have to fight for what we want. And it will be a battle, and it's going to be amplified by what's coming with AI, the ability for digital surveillance, the idea that we're going to, this Genius Act that passed recently, basically it's a stable coin's about 1 step away from a CBDC, and they're obviously moving that direction. So we better be ready to fight for what we want and find a way to escape from this system and not be captured.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about lately too, and again, it's why I'm just excited to talk to you. As whenever we do, just because you're a history buff, you really study your history, and I love history as well. And I was thinking about Genghis Khan a lot lately, and just like some of the old despots, dictators, raping and pillaging cities, and it was like for so long it was very easy to see, like people could see the bad guy or like the person doing something because it was physical and it was visible. Now we live, like you said, AI, we live in this ephemeral world. It's invisible. And a lot of the the robber barons of the world, they've been able to do this invisibly behind closed doors. They don't come village to village and you can point them out easily. It's very hard. And they found a better way, evil did, to do their dirty work. And it's even more insidious, and it incepts more of your life, actually. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And I thought about that with you even more when I was kind of just preparing to talk with you, because it just, boy, we live in this world where it's so hard to orange pill and talk to someone about freedom, about truth, about sound money, because it's like, well, what do you mean? Like, where is it, George? Like, where is it, Brandon? Like, I don't see it. It didn't come to my village. Like, I think we're good. We're okay. So here we are.
Genghis Khan, one of my favorite quotes. Now, I'll just paraphrase it because nobody was standing there when he said that. But basically, he said, you must have committed great sins against God to have a punishment like me sent to you. And I'm telling you right now, those villages, the cities and the towns that resisted Genghis Khan, they were often razed to the ground. Every single human being and child slaughtered or sold into slavery. And that's been a pattern that's all followed all through the history of mankind. Speaking of history, humanoids, the people, Homo sapiens that we might recognize on this planet, we've only been here probably maybe at 300,000 years, somewhere in that ballpark figure. But it's only in the last 10,000 years that we finally transitioned into a farmer community, meaning we settled down from hunter-gatherers. And in that entire time, for that period of mankind's history, ever since we've settled down, we began to build wealth. That is what that whole system is about. You could create more food. You could have more children. You could become more powerful. You could store wealth. If you look at, once again, go back to Mesopotamia, you can find clay-lined pits where they stored grain. And if you go to some museums, I was one in recently, you can find the hollowed out shells where they would keep a ledger inside there of who owed what. And you would break that, just like breaking the bond of debt when it was in payment. So we have searched for money all this time, and we found it. I mean, Bitcoin is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. We found it. We're here. We made it. But now we've got to fight to protect it. Bitcoin's not just going to survive because we want it to, or not survive in the way that we have access to it, whether it's fiat rails into the system, where it's KYC, AML constraints on our entry and exit of the system. There are a lot of things coming forward that we need to address, and you're going to have to be tough. Like I said, you're going to have to toughen up, and you're going to have to fight for what you want. And yes, in the history of mankind, most combat was conducted up close. The gladius, the sword of the Romans, probably about, on average, because it varied, but around 16 inches long. You were up close to people when you were wielding that thing. And you got to see things up close that might have not been something that you could do at a distance. Well, guess what? In today's world, in today's warfare, that's changing. We're going to see an explosion of AI over the next 3 years that's going to water eyes. I'm already dumbfounded. The things that I do using AI are incredible. And that AI is coming for you. You're being lied to. When people tell you that they're not going to be taking jobs using AI, that's a lie. That is not correct. Those jobs are going to be disappearing, and they're going to disappear in a different segment than we've seen in the past. It's going to be white collar. It's going to be things that haven't been traditionally disrupted by an advance in technology. I was there, I remember in it was 2001 when they passed it, but the entry of China into World Trade Organization, groundbreaking, changed the world forever. It is part of the reason we live in the world we do today, where we can't manufacture jack shit, along with the Triffin's dilemma, the fact that we have been exporting dollars and buying junk from around the world. So just getting back to the basic things I want to express to people is that there's going to be a tremendous disruption. And if you believe in the fourth turning, if you follow Neil Howe's writings on that, you know that we are in the crisis mode right now. What does that mean? That means that since 2008, for the next 20 to 25 years, we're going to be going through a shitstorm. And we're in it now, and it's about ready to break. The good news is it's not doom and gloom, because quite frankly, once we get through this disrupted period, the amount of abundance that AI and humanoid robots and, everything from driving to just the delivery of goods, transport,
3D printing.
It's going to be incredible. It could be the world of abundance, and we could all live in it. We're going to need a money for it, and it's going to be a digital money. It's not going to be some jack shit gold bar that you jam up your ass. It's going to be digital. And that is the key going forward. And I want that digital asset to be Bitcoin. I don't want it to be a stable coin trading around Bitcoin. I understand the need for stable coins. And I understand that people in disadvantaged countries, they need stable coins. Because why? They're being debased at a rate that's 10 times what we are. And they can't handle it. They can't stand that volatility to be destroyed like that. So they need something, and they go into dollars. They understand they need stable coins. I get it. But going forward, I want Bitcoin to be the base layer to money.
The world is changing. Privacy, sovereignty, and freedom are no longer optional. They are essential. If you are still holding your Bitcoin on an exchange, you are vulnerable to your Bitcoin being frozen or the Bitcoin not even being there. In a world of broken trust, a fallen world, we need to be able to know through code, through math, that we have the keys to our wealth. We don't need to trust some third party. We don't need to trust some government. We don't need to trust some ruler on high that they're going to have our wealth and not censor it from us. Just ask European Union how that's going right now. And that's why at Foundation, they're building Bitcoin tools that are open source, privacy first, and actually simple to use. It's the only kind of Bitcoin crypto tools you should be using. The Passport Core is a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet, probably made in the USA. The only one that I know of, fully air-gapped, no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to compromise your keys, with a large screen, seamless QR workflows, and encrypted micro SD backups. It is here for the average person or the advanced cryptographer as well. Along with your purchase, you get the attachments, the USB-C cord, the iOS and Android attachments, micro SD card, and the USB-C cable. You don't have to go searching around for everything. You also get the free Envoy mobile app as well. You can buy Bitcoin straight into your self-custody. It helps you set up your Passport Core, label and track your coins, manage your keys, and do so much more. Foundation built the core and their company for sovereignty and freedom for all of humanity. You can take back control of your money and your digital life now. Get started today at foundation.xyz/Brandon, foundation.xyz/BRANDON, or check the link in the description.
I think the big thing is really why is that though, George? Like why? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that they're like, well, you guys are just moon boys. You just want to pump your own bags. Hey guys, tech moves on. Like it's, there's always like some excuse, which when you think about it, like before we all knew Bitcoin and really studied it, you'd think the same thing. We all did to a degree until you really put the hours in to understand Bitcoin. So I'd love for you just to touch on briefly why Bitcoiners have this cultist mentality to a degree. Like why do people die on that hill of Bitcoin when there is this new Bitcoin and life is all probabilities and there's different attack surfaces with each of these coins. So why is it in your mind that Bitcoin is the thing and there's not going to be something 5 years from now or 10 years from now that's going to come along and usurp Bitcoin?
Oh, that's a deep question. Damn. Let me think about that for a minute. How would I approach that? I might go back to Satoshi himself and ask, why was Bitcoin, what did Bitcoin come out of? What fire was it born out of? And obviously it was the great financial crisis. He built on the shoulders, though, of many others who had come before him. It was inevitable that we would find at some point digital cash. You can look at some of the great Austrian economics visionaries, and that was the thing that they couldn't understand, how to separate that money from state. Bitcoin is the way to do that. What's it say in that headline? It's peer-to-peer electronic cash, and Bitcoin is money. It's not some data protocol transmission device. We're not here to put on fucking monkeys, JPEGs and rocks and other crap. We are here to use money. This is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. And we can't dick this up. I mean, we have got to stay committed to this protocol. We have to win. And, I realize that to the outsiders, we look like a cult. I'm well aware of that. But, the thing is that what's it say about, part of the things that I'm trying to get a handle around, that I'm really struggling with right now, is, are we ever going to see anybody following us? Mm-hmm. We're trying to lead into a new world here. We're like pioneers. We are like that scout in front of a wagon train. And those scouts, most of them came from old trappers in the 1840s. in the U.S. They knew the areas, they knew the different people, the indigenous people there. They understood the terrain, they understood the passes. They were leaders. They got in a place where they could take a wagon train on the way to a new world. So what I feel sometimes is that we're like those leaders, but when you look around and you turn around in your saddle and you look behind you, who the hell's following you? You know, you're probably better at this than myself, but I've been doing this for years now. And I can tell you right now, the people that I have orange pilled into Bitcoin that are real Bitcoiners that have gone down the rabbit hole and they hold Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. You know how many there are? I can put them on this hand, less than that. And why is that? You've got an asset that has performed 55% CAGR for the last 5 years. Over the last decade, it's 80% CAGR. Nothing beats that. There's no asset that's going to beat that. It has beat NVIDIA over that period of time. There's nothing that beats it. So if it's such a powerful storage of wealth, and you and I know that we can use it as a medium of exchange, then why isn't anybody here? Where is retail? You know, if you look at any search analytics right now, again, turn around the saddle. Look behind you there across the Great Plains that you're crossing. There's no retail behind you. They're not even here. What's driving this market is adoption on institutional level. Originally, ETFs, they were manned mainly by retail investors, the Bitcoin spot ETFs. I think it was like around up to 80%. It's not that now. It's dropping all the time. They're coming. They're the ones that's driving this market. The reason we're a $2 trillion market right now is because of that. You know, there's not enough retail interest out there that it could ever move us to a $2 trillion market. If you want to capture gold, if you want to upset a $22 trillion market, you can't do it with just retail. So why do people not get it? I mean, that's your real question. I know there's two blocks right now. You know, one of them is, look at me, it's age. I'll tell you right now, the biggest block that I've seen so far when I'm talking to people is age. The older you get, the stupider you get when it comes to Bitcoin. And the other thing is education. You know, I have talked to people that are in finance, traditional finance. I remember having a very clear conversation with a banker one time, been in banking for decades, when I tried to explain to him Bitcoin. And then when I told him that I had all my wealth in Bitcoin, he just looked at me with the biggest shock on his face. He said, that's stupid. The smarter you are, the harder it is to grok Bitcoin. And if people are coming, I don't know. I have a feeling that someday we're going to look back here in 5 years and it's just going to be people like you and me and some other people that come in, short-term holders that have bought in, and then they stick around. And it's going to be a small group, Brandon. I don't think it's ever going to be a large portion of the population.
And you and I might have talked about this before, but I'm writing a small book about this, but I've resigned after almost 10 years in Bitcoin to, it's going to be 3%. You know, we're at, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2%, I don't know, whatever, call it 0.5% of adoption, maybe worldwide, of people who truly get it, understand Bitcoin, like you said, grok it. And I think we need to get to 3%. Because I look back at the Revolutionary War. I look back some of these things over time where only a couple % of people fought in the war. Most people they didn't care. They're like, well, whatever. But the beauty of that was that the other 97%, once the war was won, they got the Bill of Rights also. They got the Constitution. They won as well. And I really believe that that's probably where we're headed as well. Like you said, there's not the cavalry isn't really coming. There's not many more reinforcements really coming. It's, you look around, you strap in, this is who's in the trenches with you, and we're going, boys. Like that's kind of where I've resigned myself to. So we need to educate more, and a couple % more that are going to come, but it's not, most people will never get it. They don't understand the system we're in now. So how do we expect them to get the new system?
But it's not like we should give up. Just like you just said right now, we should never give up, and we should not stop trying to educate, because it does help. I've already noticed that the long-term holders, it's going up and to the right. People are holding on to their Bitcoin. You know, this recent downturn that we had probably shook some people out. There's some poor son of a bitch that bought yesterday when it was on its run up to 124K, probably bought 124K. And then this morning he's looking, going, you know, what the hell did I do? He's probably already sold by now. But out of every short-term holder cycle that we come through, and we have all this FOMO and people do buy in, there are always some that survive with us. And we need to build conviction for the people that are in the space now. They need to understand what they hold and to learn patience. It's like we've got this 30-second attention span, and it's difficult to get people to understand that you've got to have patience. You've got to be plodding along when it comes to Bitcoin. You stack, you hold, and that's it. It's as simple as it can be. Fidelity just put out some recent data that I thought was incredible. You could almost trade on what I'm about to say. In all these major news events that have been occurring over the last year or two, Fidelity tracked to see what happened with Bitcoin. You know that when we have some of these events like yesterday, the inflation print, and Scott Bessent, running his mouth on Fox News. Well, during these events, when there's major corrections like that, even more strong events, Bitcoin correlates to all these assets. It just does. That's the nature of assets. That's how it works. When people are in fear, things correlate to one, everything sells off. Bitcoin has liquidity, the greatest liquidity. It trades 24/7, Saturday, Sunday. People can, get in and out of Bitcoin. It's going to react fast. You have to have the stomach and the fortitude and to understand what you own to get through those periods. So, this is important. We still need to try and orange pill people. It's just you have to realize that this is a very difficult subject for people to get. And I have a feeling going forward, like you, I think these numbers that I've read in the past, like 300, 400 million people in Bitcoin, that's I don't think that's true. That's not even close. There are so few people that actually hold Bitcoin. You can prove that to yourself if you're willing to. Just go inside a crowded room sometime and talk to people. Find out what it is that they are, what they think of Bitcoin. So, it's a difficult problem to solve. And I don't think that we're going to be able to do this except over a long period of time. That's all there is to it.
I could not agree more. I would love your thoughts on, you touched on a little bit, Scott Bessent, the government's, everyone coming out, hey, you promised us Bitcoin reserve, you're gonna buy Bitcoin, all these things, we voted for you, which, hey, there's a lot of people that truthfully, that is what happened, right? So, the promises made, promises kept, and there, like you said, Scott Bessent comes out and, we're not buying Bitcoin. And then they retract it, a few hours later or whatever it is. So it's just all over the map. I mean, I would love your overall macro thoughts on the government, being in Bitcoin, what should or shouldn't happen, what might happen. I would love your thoughts and just unpack this.
Yeah. I posted something yesterday on X because I think it was kind of the final straw for me. And not only that, ever since Prague, ever since I've just been sitting quietly sometimes and thinking about Bitcoin and where we go here in the future, I've had a chance to really explore my thoughts about the current environment that we're in regarding both politics, Bitcoin treasury companies, incoming liquidity, institutional arrival, sovereign nations. And, I'm getting to a point now where, first off, I'll just frame it like this. I don't like these politicians. There's no politician I like. I mean, Thomas Massey, I could have a beer with him and stuff, but I don't trust him. I don't trust any of these people.
No.
And they have their own agendas. They don't care about you and they don't care about me. And just look around at yourself if you're listening or, you're watching this, just look around and they don't really care about you. You're not important. You're not their agenda. So we have seen over this ever since January of 2024, we have seen many Bitcoiners, including myself, get very excited about ETFs, Bitcoin treasury companies, politicians, political landscape. What has really been done in this administration since they came into office? They've cleared a lot of regulatory hurdles, but none of it, very few, I won't say none of it, the Digital Assets and the Clarity Act, and obviously the Genius Act. These are two, legislated acts that aren't just executive orders. that aren't just pieces of paper that somebody can take and throw in a garbage can. And if you are thinking that there could not be a change in an admin, a total change, meaning Congress, both House and Senate and the presidential office in the next 3 years, you don't know history. You haven't studied it. Things can go to shit very quickly. And if they do, if this economy goes off the rails, or if people are disrupted greatly because of AI as we go through the transition period to greater abundance, anything can happen. And if a new administration comes in here and in 3 years, it's all one side of the party and they don't like us, because what have we done over the last year and a half? Now, if you look around and you look at Bitcoin and you ask people on the street, Bitcoin is associated with the right wing, with Trump, with the Republican Party. I don't belong to any party. My party is George and the people I love. And my concern is sound money. And I see only one avenue to sound money. That is Bitcoin. So what I'm going to ask people that are listening or watching this right now is for you to step back, go into a quiet place, think to yourself for more than 30 seconds, and just think to yourself what you want in the future. What is the future you envision? And if you think our future is tied to a blue party or a red party or to a politician, I would really ask you to question your thesis and where you think that comes from. And then, God, I think I'm in the same rant mood I was in yesterday. I don't think I've calmed down quite from that. Because
I love it.
Well, take it to the next level. Look at these treasury companies. You think these treasury companies really give a shit about who you are? We've got Michael Saylor and Strategy. We've got some copycat clones. We've got some people that are truly breaking ground here. I'll tell you right now, Metaplanet, if you listen to Simon Jarovich closely and really follow him and Dylan, they are doing it. I mean, they are breaking ground. They are setting new avenues, new roads to incorporate Bitcoin within the Japanese and greater society. Now they're using something called strike warrants. They can't do ATM. That's a U.S. Type of a product, at the market. In other words, in the morning at 9:30, you can issue shares and incorporate them on your balance sheet. They're not debt, but they can't do that. They're doing something called strike warrants. And there's $15 trillion that households hold in wealth in Japan. And the most they're going to earn is right around 0%. So they are yield starved. They are dying to find some kind of a product that can give them yield. And they're going to do it. I think that Metaplanet I think they're overlooked, undervalued. And this is not financial advice. You're looking at an idiot here. But the bottom line is, I think they're going to be successful in doing this. And then you've got some other companies that are obviously very focused on Bitcoin. But then what about all these other copycat companies out there? You think that they're committed to Bitcoin, the asset, or Bitcoin, the money, or they want to fix the money, fix the world? What you want to do going forward, if you're a Bitcoiner, you don't want to be exit liquidity for anybody, and you don't need to. That's actually, let's just sum it up by saying this. You don't need to be exit liquidity for anybody on the planet. You don't need them. If you just understand what you hold, buy Bitcoin and put it in cold storage, you're set. You'll never have to worry about some of the things I'm discussing today. And in fact, you're not going to beat their return. Now, Strategy for me actually has beat that return, but I don't anticipate it going forward. Someday, all those MNAVs are going to start compressing to one. They logically should. Just work it out on paper. And at some point, if we do have a downturn, they're going to transition. They're going to go below one. Then what should those companies do? Many of them are going to sell. They're going to sell their Bitcoin like a son of a bitch. Next thing you know, you're going to get into a recursive loop, a feedback loop that's not going to be beneficial for Bitcoin. It'll be a great time to stack sats by then, but at the same time, you need to protect yourself. And how you do it is just how I said. Later on, when we get a chance, make sure we'll cycle back into this, but I want to talk about how I buy Bitcoin too at some point, okay?
Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter. If you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party, this is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. What do we have here? 12-word seed plate. After a long wait and everything being sold out, this is now here, the 12-word seed plate. For those who have been asking, store your generational wealth in titanium forever. Do not make the mistake of storing it on paper. This can withstand fire, nuclear fallout, wind. We've driven over it. We shot hockey pucks at it. We've checked it. We've thrown it. We've done everything possible. Do not pass down your generational wealth on paper. Put it in titanium. Go to stampseed.com. Put in code Brandon, BRANDON, for 15% off store-wide. Do not be a statistic. Show your family how much you love them. Store your generational wealth forever in titanium. Code Brandon, 15% off store-wide.
So speaking of all of that, what about Bitcoin itself? I mean, where are you? I know you keep up. I just had James Checkmate on, or James Checkmate or Checkmatey on just in like the last month. It was awesome conversation that we had. He ran through everything. So I know you're a student of his. What are you, when you look at like even the CAGR, like that's been declining over time and people are making a lot of noise about that. Like, oh, it's the lowest it's been in 4 years, just the CAGR, everything. Like when you look at just Bitcoin itself, like you said, you don't have to be exit liquidity when you're in Bitcoin. It's a system outside of that legacy fiat sinking Titanic that we're on. So what do you see for the growth of Bitcoin when you kind of zoom out and look at everything right now?
Well, let's just talk current right now. We'll just go through current market right now.
Yep.
We've had a significant drawdown. I don't know what Bitcoin is today. I didn't look at it. And I like to look at Bitcoin price. There are some people, they act almost like it's like they're snobs. Well, I never look at the price. I don't care about NGU. Fuck that. I watch NGU all the time. I love the number go up. How do you think we're going to get people on board except NGU? So I love it. I have no concern about that. But just looking right now at the market today, things are really healthy. I mean, very healthy. Bitcoin loves to inflict pain, and it loves to inflict pain on the way up and on the way down. And really what it wants to do is both. It wants to liquidate tremendous positions in both the up and downside. And it does constantly. And what's really unique about this cycle is that it's doing that, and then it retests these lows and stabilizes. It's like, I have never seen it behave like this. There is a strong underpinning bid to Bitcoin that holds it in place. And I expect that to continue. I don't think that's going to stop. These ideas, I will tell you right now, I do not have confidence anymore in a 4-year cycle. I think we are in a new world. And that's not to mean I disagree with what Saylor said, the crypto winter is not coming back. There'll be drawdowns. And I'll tell you right now, you get a 50, 60% drawdown for a little bit. That's going to be like crypto winter for a lot of people that have not been tested, because there are tremendous amounts of coins that have changed hand now. Unbelievable amount above 90,000. So that's almost like a new cohort above 90K. Those people have never seen a really significant drawdown yet. And if we get that, it's going to be a trying time for them. It bounces back. I want to touch on something you just said, though. You mentioned, you said Bitcoin outside the system. And, that's the key kind of to some of our discussion today. And it's kind of ties in with what I was discussing before about how I'm working myself into a new mindset. I'm very fortunate. I got to get into Bitcoin at a time when I had finances and that I could transfer them and smash buy into Bitcoin. And let me raise my hand right now. Hi, my name is George. I'm a smash buyer of Bitcoin. You should say welcome, George. And so the thing is that if you really believe in Bitcoin, as I mentioned before, and you live outside the system, you're going to have a great life. You can have that life now. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to be like me and in a position where financially you're independent. You don't give a shit what's happening. I don't care because I live outside this system. I don't care what Scott Bessent said yesterday. It's meaningless to me. I don't care what the Fed says. I don't care what Trump, he can sit at the desk and make all kinds of announcements, EOs and every other damn thing. I just don't care. I live in a different world, and it's a peaceful world. It's a great world where, you get to do what you want in life. And I'm not talking about not working anymore. I was discussing with you before we started here. I'm busy as hell right now. I'm like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest right now. And I'm studying, I'm training, I'm working my butt off, getting ready to, I'm going to go hunt elk with a bow. And that's not for the faint of heart. I mean, I pack up my shit. I carry my stuff in on my back. I set up a camp deep in the woods, far away from anybody. Often I'm the only person sitting in that 5-mile long valley full of little critters and stuff. And, it's a place where you've got to be on top of your game. And that takes work, but it's fun. It's something I want to do. I'm in the studio today. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to get back to work on a painting that I'm doing from Prague. And it's fun. I'm enjoying it. I'm traveling. It's fun. I enjoy it. I'm with somebody I love. And all these things are coming for you because you live outside the system. But I see so many people, especially on X, they're posting all kinds of jack shit stuff that involves their short-term concerns about all kinds of things that are just unrelated to the future. If you really believe in Bitcoin, you should be at peace.
Yep. Yeah, I could not agree more. Could not agree more. You should absolutely be at peace. How do you ride the balance? I mean, because again, we talked about Genghis Khan earlier. I think about the Revolutionary War. I've been trying to square the circle, George, and maybe you can help me with this because, I'm 38 now, and in 25 years ago, really was some of my first real memories of, in the 90s of the Libertarian Party, or late 90s, I should say. So, the people not voting. And to me, that always struck me as odd. So like, how do you square this circle? Like, we live as a Bitcoiner, you live outside the system, yet at the same time, we are all still in this fiat system in some way, shape, or fashion. And how do you get out of it? I guess where I'm going with this is that there's the fight inside the Bitcoin community itself of the cypherpunk ethos and, the statist Bitcoiner, right? As they say, right. And I empathize and fall along the side of the cypherpunk, like F government, get out of my life. But at the same time, I'm like, well, the Trojan horse, I feel like it has to get inside the gates at some point to be able to start dismantling things from the inside. So how do you square this circle in your mind? Or like, how do we, it feels like at times we're building this system, this sly roundabout way, in the shadows. Then all of a sudden, in 5 years, we're going to like come and like show it to everybody. Like, hey guys, look what we built. Come over here. It's great. At some point, like, like we're not elves at the North Pole, like building, secret things. And then we just like show up one day, like, here's our system. Like, so how does this all come together? Like, how are we transferring from the Titanic onto the lifeboat? Is it going to be a flipping of the iceberg event, or does it happen over time? Like, I'm having a really hard time just squaring the circle in the infighting that goes on, which is healthy, mind you. It's great that people are alive and with it. But at the same time, coming back to my original thing of being a part of the system. And I feel like, libertarians or Bitcoiners at times, we're like, F it, I'm not dealing with this. Why am I dealing with this? And at the same time, that's kind of what evil wants. Evil wants good people to sit idly by and do nothing and just kind of walk away. So like, I don't know. I don't know how to square that circle.
Well, I've always thought of Bitcoin, not always. In the past, I've compared Bitcoin to the apex predator. And the reason I say that is because I always like that idea. I always pictured a T-Rex, out there. And I just like that metaphor. It always worked for me. But, accurately, I don't think it's correct. I think Bitcoin is really a virus. It is a virus. And, it's a good virus in the sense that it doesn't kill its host. Ebola is a virus, but it kills people so quickly that it can't expand fast enough. Villages die in total. By the time people arrive, they're all gone. That's a bad virus. But Bitcoin, we have viruses that have been with us now for millennia. I mean, I mentioned Mesopotamia, and even before then, you look at the Egyptians. We have viruses that they had, that they're still here. So a good virus lives on its host, doesn't destroy its host, and it spreads. The ideal virus spreads all across the planet. And Bitcoin, in my mind, is that virus. And you aren't going to stop it. It is spreading. So, the funny thing too, and I think you even talked to Giovanni Santastasi in person.
Yep.
And, he's kind of, I've mentioned this before, he's kind of a prickly guest, and he's argumentative on X. He's definitely his worst enemy, but nonetheless, he's done a lot of valid work behind the power law. And the power law is not unique to him. I mean, that is a law that has been used to describe many different natural phenomena, and it fits perfectly with viruses. So what I'm trying to say is I think that this revolution is going to be a quiet revolution where Bitcoin seeps into every aspect of the world. And why do I say that? Because just look around. What have you seen over the last 2 years even? You have seen nothing but nonstop, relentless inroads from Bitcoin into everything you can imagine. Who would have ever thought we'd have sovereign wealth funds buying into Bitcoin? But they are, all of them. Whoever thought, 3 years ago, I never thought I'd see pension funds buying into Bitcoin. They are. Insurance funds buying into Bitcoin. Nation states, they're stacking Bitcoin. Don't kid yourself. They are stacking. So we are going to win. It's just going to be a quiet revolution, which is what we want, isn't it? We don't want the Mad Max scenario. I don't want to see that. I want to see a nice, quiet turnover so that somebody wakes up one day and they realize they've been infected. I want us to just slowly inculcate across every stratum of society and government and politicians, which, if you believe in Bitcoin, is inevitable. Now, when I say inevitable, I don't mean that you don't have to fight for Bitcoin. You do. I mean, things aren't going great in the Bitcoin space in some regards. So you got to fight for it. You got to do the right things to make Bitcoin survive. And then again, if you understand Bitcoin, what do you have to do? You just got to stack like a smart psychopath and hodl. And then you won. You've already won the war, and you're immune to the virus. You've got the virus in you and you welcome it and you're working with it.
Do you think, going back really quick for a second, do you think that we're dealing with price suppression anywhere? Do you get the sense that there's some things going on? I mean, humans always are, trying to get a leg up and do stuff. I mean, I guess that's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? That it shouldn't matter because of the auditability every 10 minutes. Eventually you will get found out, right? The shorts will get obliterated no matter who you are at any time. You could get liquidated. What is your sentiment on all that right now?
Well, when you look, if you're going to talk about paper Bitcoin, you need to make sure and concentrate on the right sector. I had somebody the other day arguing with me, or not arguing, but just pointing out to me on X that the ETFs have paper Bitcoin. That's bullshit. I mean, that is absolutely incorrect. These are major institutions that they're not going to be able to hide that. You can't keep a secret like that. I had a top secret clearance in the Navy when I was flying F-18s, and I also was a nuclear loading officer, and so I had an even higher clearance. And I used to go down into the spaces, the SAS spaces, special ammunition storage lockers, bunkers down, and they keep them right in the center of the ship, as you can imagine. For obvious reasons. And I'm telling you, you talk about not fucking around. When you go down there, you've got Marines standing in front of those hatchways, and some of those hatchways, you can't imagine how big they are. They weigh like small Volkswagens, and to get into one of those hatches and go down into those spaces and to do whatever you're doing, I can't discuss it, but with nuclear weapons, So the reason I'm telling you this is one thing I learned a long time ago is 3 people can keep a secret, provided 2 of them are dead. And so there is no way these organizations are colluding and not settling Bitcoin at the end of the day. It's just not happening. That is not paper Bitcoin. There is Bitcoin backing up every one of those ETFs. I would like to see these ETFs publish proof of reserves. In fact, I think it should be a requirement going forward, just like the BTC treasury companies could. Michael Saylor pushing back that it's going to compromise security. That's bullshit. It's not going to compromise security. They can do that now. Anyway, so if you're going to talk about paper Bitcoin, then get your focus correct. And that's in the derivatives market. And, people are saying derivative all the time. What's that mean? It's just a contract. It's a contract on underlying assets, in this case, Bitcoin. And yes, if you do a deep research on Grok and ChatGPT and maybe a couple others and try to back up the research, you can see where paper Bitcoin could exist, meaning there are people that are buying futures and they never are actually trading the underlying asset. They settle in cash. That's the way it works. It is a very small number. It's probably 1% at max. It's not price suppression. Okay, that's not what's going on here. First off, how anybody could be unhappy right now with the way Bitcoin is moving in price means that you don't realize that we are building a base in price discovery that is going to go for long, long time. We are not in any kind of a euphoria phase now in Bitcoin, and we don't want to be. I've seen that. What happens? You exhaust yourself at the top very quickly. So yeah, you could zoom up to 160,000, and guess what? The next thing you know, you're going to be down to 80,000 again. That's not what we want. We want a nice, slow, stair-step progression, just like James Check has been discussing. And he puts out great signal, just as you mentioned. So that is what we want going forward, because I want this to continue. There's nothing to stop this bull run. My base case was 225,000. It still is 225,000. And I'm not even convinced that we're going to have massive pullbacks. So, people seem to be, again, I don't know if it's the 30-second time span or the problem with attention, but the bottom line is this is a very healthy market right now. And you shouldn't be thinking about suppressed price. What you should really think about is, what are my opportunities to stack? And that's just my opinion. If I can back that up, if you do the research on it, you'll see, yes, probably in the derivatives market, you could call it paper Bitcoin, but it's not rehypothecated. It's not stolen Bitcoin. I'll tell you right now, these U.S. institutions, if they do that, people are going to go to prison.
It's a perfect segue to a lot of the things that people you hear it a lot. You hear it a lot right now, and you've heard it a lot really in the last handful of years of, well, I'm too late, George. I'm getting XRP because it's $1. I'm getting such and such coin because it's 7 cents. What are your thoughts? What's your sentiment? What are you telling people when because many of us, as we know, and you and I have talked before. A fraction of a Bitcoin, could you not live forever on a fraction of a Bitcoin? If you're stacking Bitcoin, like you just said, it's all you stay humble and stack sats, as Odell always says. That's all you need. It just time is the differentiator.
Yeah, now that's not going to apply for somebody my age. A fraction of a Bitcoin, but yeah, somebody your age or younger, yeah, a fraction of a Bitcoin, you will have generational wealth. And what do you have to do? You just have to buy the damn thing and then hold it. Rather than go down that road right now, this would be a great opportunity to talk about how I buy Bitcoin. Because trying to justify why it's Bitcoin versus XRP or some other token or some other jack shit investment that you think is going to have a greater return than Bitcoin means that if you're thinking like this, you don't understand Bitcoin, because it's not just Bitcoin's rate of return that you're trying to beat. You're also looking at the risk portfolio of whatever it is you hold. Now, if you really and truly understand Bitcoin, Bitcoin is, in my mind, about as risk-free as you can get. Now, that's just me. What about duration risk? It's non-existent. Duration works in your favor holding Bitcoin. You don't have to check any portfolios. You don't have to look at any filings. You basically just have the best asset on planet Earth. You're set. So why do you have to beat that CAGR? And I didn't address your question on CAGR earlier, and I'll cover it right now. So you don't need to beat its CAGR. If 55% CAGR is not good enough for you over the last 5 years, I'd have to say, you know what? You probably don't belong in this space. You actually should find something else to do in life. Because if you have been in traditional finance at all, or you looked around and you've studied and you've tried to beat the S&P 500, you know that 55% CAGR is at a different level of return. And this is a perfect segue into what I wanted to mention, which is, one thing, volatility has been decreasing as our market size increases. When you look at the market cap and then you look at the realized cap, which is just as important, that's looking at the price of Bitcoin at the last time it changed hands. We're over $1 trillion now. It takes a lot to move that market. So volatility is going to decrease. And shouldn't you be happy about that? Look at all those poor leaky lettuce hands that are out there that are holding all the Bitcoin. And well, imagine a 30 and 40% drop. I mean, that used to be routine. I never used to faze me after a while. So, but the CAGR, where is Bitcoin going in the future? Who says that the CAGR has to dip down to 25 or 30% over the next 10 years? I don't. Now, I did, I think it might have even been James pushing back about the idea of a 50% CAGR going forward over the next 10 years, looking at the market cap of Bitcoin. But you know what? If you do that, if you put those numbers in with that rate of return, I think it comes out to about $100 trillion. Well, you already mentioned it earlier in this podcast. You said we have a $1,000 trillion of assets. And that's just forecast by Jesse Myers. He updated his model recently. And so what does that represent? 10% over 10 years? Does that seem unrealistic? And remember the other thing too. It doesn't take $100 trillion into Bitcoin's market cap to go up $100 trillion. There is a multiplier effect. And you can use a number somewhere between probably 4 and 5 to calculate that, of how much it would take to move the market cap. So for me personally, I think that things are going to continue going up and to the right. And again, what is the message for today? All you got to do is buy Bitcoin, or, depending upon how you do it, continue to DCA or smash buy, however it is that whatever floats your boat, but you need to get as much Bitcoin as you can.
I would love just a quick thought on diminishing returns. And because again, that's another thing, right? So that's the next thing that someone says, well, okay, there might be a multiplier, George, but at some point, I mean, look at all the great news, look at all the amazing things going on. And Bitcoin's only at 125,000, it's going up 10x, then it's a 5x. Now it's up 2x in the last year. Like, looks like the bull runs over. What are you, because again, I laugh because you have to, in a way. We're coming full circle to this thing we talked about. There's only a couple percent of the population we need. We're at a fraction of that understand Bitcoin, and that's why there's a lot of people that watch this show that are learning. They're trying to understand what's going on and really put their hours in. Put their 100 hours in that they need to understand. Like you and I were at some point. All Bitcoiners were at some point. So just putting into perspective, Bitcoin is money. So capturing this market, I would love a quick thought on it, just because people, again, I just talked to a cop the other day. I met this guy, he's my age, and we talked for like an hour and a half. He gets out of his squad car. We're in my front lawn just talking, and met him, and amazing guy. He went and bought Bitcoin later that day. Like, we were having this conversation. He's a military buff, and we're all this stuff. And it was just an amazing conversation. But he's like, he's kind of going well, I heard some diminishing returns, like the return might not be there. So, I mean, this is a very real thing. And I know people sometimes get sick of it in the Bitcoin community, hear it over and over, but it's so important because 99% of people are just learning this now.
Yeah, I'd have to say that is the theme over this last year is I'm too late. It's too late for Bitcoin, and I missed the boat. And I'm here to tell you, if you just look at the numbers, you've got to think this through. For instance, if you look at where we're going next, we are going to flip gold. That is where we're headed. That's our next agenda. And it's going to happen. Portable, divisible, fungible, verifiable, scarce, seizure resistant. These are the things that make money. Every one of those things that I listed right now, if you compare gold to Bitcoin, Bitcoin runs circles around it. They're not even in the same league. They don't exist on the same planet. Gold is a relic, an analog rock. And, I don't want to piss off gold bugs because I've been a gold bug. And gold bugs are basically Bitcoiners. They just don't know it yet. If you really are a hard money, sound money person, you will understand Bitcoin. at some point. You'll get it at the price you deserve. For all those people that are concerned about returns, what are you going to say to them then? So at what point, so is it too late for Bitcoin now? If I'm right and it goes, that's $1.2 million a coin. There are 4 reports that have come up that I've read within the last 2 months that are talking about $1 million Bitcoin between 2028 and 2032. That's not a lot of time. So
Right.
Are you just going to sit there, with your thumb up your ass and wait for it to do what? What are you waiting for? You remember those clowns? You remember when Bitcoin dipped down to, I think it was around 16,000, and those clowns came on there and said, "Oh, it's going to 12." There were people, I even read about one of them. Somebody replied to me today about how he missed his opportunity because he was waiting for it to go to 12. And he said, I could have bought right there at 16. And then he waited. Next thing you know, it was doubled. Then it went doubled again. And he thought, how could I have done this? Well, you know what? He was waiting for that dip to buy. Now, this is a great time. Perfect segue into what I want to discuss next. But the last thing I'm going to say is, at some point on this one subject, the last thing I'll say is this. You know what? Someday somebody's going to be standing in my studio here. They're going to go, hey, I'm too late. I missed it. You know what? I'm going to look around and say, you're right. Yeah, you did. You fucking missed it because you sat on your butt and didn't get off it and study the asset and buy. And so, yeah, you missed it. You're not going to see the kind of returns you want. And then the thing that I want to talk about is buying Bitcoin, because this will sound like almost like maybe disingenuous on my part, or that I haven't been totally honest, because all these times I have told people to buy through DCA. DCA, and if you're not familiar, it's just dollar cost averaging. Set up some kind of a program. Do it every week, do it every month, whatever the hell it is you think works for you, and just steadily stack. Now, that doesn't mean that if you employ that strategy that you wouldn't look at some of the metrics that I follow on chain and say to yourself, oh my God, Bitcoin's very highly valued right now. This might not be a time for me to smash buy a lot of Bitcoin, or not smash buy, but to DCA right now. Maybe I'll wait. And you can maybe stack more Bitcoin that way. But, that's not, even though I tell people that, that's not how I bought Bitcoin. I bought like I was a drunken sailor. I ended up, I started going down the rabbit hole. I bought some Bitcoin. The next day I woke up and I thought, I need more Bitcoin. And then I started buying some more. And the next thing you know, I was buying and buying, and it would go up and I'd keep buying. When sometimes I'd get convicted enough that I would liquidate a position in something, including gold. And I'd put all that money, I just smash bought right there. Just grabbed it. And I always thought to myself, I'd only seen one data point that might have backed up my philosophy here. But recently there's a new one that came out, and it's by Theo Magenet. He's on X, and I can't remember his X handle. But he put out a report here, and it is a simulation using AI. So he's built millions of portfolios looking at different time frames over 10 years. And for people like myself that smash bought versus DCA. And what did he come out with? It was eye-watering. Those people that bought like I did had about a 1,700% rate of return. So the people that didn't, that DCA'd, had about around 300% return. Now, why would I not then just go out there and tell everybody, hey, smash buy? You know what? Somebody just gave you, I actually had somebody's the other day on X say, hey, I got $50,000. And I'm waiting for, and of all things, it was for some dumbass politician to make, I think it was Trump, to make a statement of something, and then I'm going to smash buy it. And I thought, oh God almighty, I didn't even respond. It's like, if I had an extra $50,000 right now, I'd smash buy right this minute. I wouldn't even wait. I'd leave enough money for a pizza this afternoon, and that's it. So, but I'm all in Bitcoin. I mean, I put it all in. So why would I not tell people to just smash buy? And it's because of that leaky lettuce hand. It's that short-term holder. It's that person that can't handle the volatility. We're used to seeing 50, 60% drawdowns. That last one, almost 80% that I went through, that shakes people out. And how would I feel if I told somebody to smash buy Bitcoin and they didn't have the conviction, and they ended up selling it? They'd probably never get back in the market. And I wouldn't even care if they hated my guts. That's not important. You know what? What's important is being in the market. You've got to be in this market. Every year, there's only 5 to 20 days where you get your major returns. You can't miss those days. You got to be in the market. So I guess where I'll leave this conversation is not financial advice. I don't have any background in finance. I am, you mentioned a cop. I'm an ex-cop, ex-miner, oil field worker, cab driver. I even flipped burgers. I used to work in a fast food restaurant. So, and a Navy pilot and stuff. Yeah. Well, the thing is that what I'm saying, there's just no background here that justifies me thinking I know what I'm talking about. And you should always question people. I told you before, you should be questioning all these people. They don't have your best interests in there. There are people in this space that I know personally in the Bitcoin space that are doing different things. They're running companies or different outlets, things I can't really discuss on here, but I will just tell you, they're not all of them are good people, and they're not all looking out for your interests.
So there's a concept, and this is kind of a good segue too, that we've talked about over time. You've talked about it. I think you've talked about it on other shows. I think you talked about it, a handful of months ago when we talked last, and it's this buy, borrow, and die concept. So now we're kind of going out the curve a little bit. You've talked about Bitcoin being the royal flush. And, you've mentioned this is what kind of made me think of this actually, which is doing the same thing over and over again is insanity. Like like you were saying, you talk to 100 people on the street, you go into a crowded room, the average person doesn't own Bitcoin, truly owns it. They don't own it in self-custody. They really don't know what's going on. However, I would venture to guess most of the people are going to give you some type of like sob story about the current market, about the current economy, about the political situation, about the civil unrest going on, about their city. They can't afford housing. They can't get a new house. So everyone knows the system is effed. And most people, 95 out of the 100 people will say that to you, admittedly. And yet they'll keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I would love your thoughts on just this, the concept of buy, borrow, die, some of this kind of just macro thought of it and why you say it's a royal flush. Because again, the average person is looking at it and they're like, hey, I know the system's effed over here, but I don't know any other thing. And then you're over here telling me this thing is so great, but that chasm is what's so hard for the average person. That's what we talked about, 100 hours of study. I mean, you study for thousands and thousands of hours. So, how do you shortcut that? Like what is that thing that really clicks for somebody, or maybe even clicked for you, where people realize, wow, this is that system change that we need, or that I'm looking for. Like you said, get a little bit, dollar cost average, and you need a little bit just to get outside that system. So I'd love for you to touch on these things. Like I said, I know there's a lot there, but the Bitcoin being the royal flush, the system change, and how that dawns on people. And also, we could talk about the buy, borrow, die in a second, but I would love your thoughts on some of these concepts.
Yeah, the buy, borrow, die strategy, and I call it dynasty, buy, borrow, die dynasty, because basically generational wealth that we've seen created in the past centuries over time involves that philosophy. And basically what it means is if you are very fortunate and you actually own something that is, we call it pristine collateral, but it could be many things. It could be like, say, a collection of Picassos, or it could be prime property somewhere. Normally we associate that with beachfront property, but something that is so valuable that its rise in value actually outpaces the debasement of whatever currency you're stuck in. And so, it makes sense. What would you do? If you knew that the money that you're going to borrow is going to be worth less every year, maybe significantly less, and you had an asset that was appreciating more every year, what would you want to do? You'd never want to get rid of that asset. That's all based, that's the entire thesis there. And I will tell you, Bitcoin is that asset. Bitcoin does that. So why can't we do that now? And the reason is, Bitcoin in cold storage is a bearer instrument. It's just like a bearer bond. I used to, years ago, I mean, I'm so old that I actually remember coupons on bonds, that you could clip off. But the thing is that it doesn't produce yield. So where are you going to get the yield to live from? That's always the crux of the issue. And right now we don't have those products built out on Bitcoin. Now you can get yield on Bitcoin. You can do covered puts. You could do that. You could make quite a bit of money. I mean, my God, you could make tons of money back in the last 22 cycle by covered puts. But the problem there is you've got to be willing to actually sell some Bitcoin and if things go against you. Or one of the things that's just come up lately is Lightning. With enough liquidity, you could earn interest or yield on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Block just proved it. $10 million, they received $1 million over a year in yield. And guess what? This is the most important thing. You know what that yield was in? Wasn't cuck bucks, was Bitcoin. That yield was in Bitcoin, the most precious asset you could get. But let's talk about the conventional lending space, the world that you and I live in. I just approached somebody the other day because I wanted to raise some cash and I wanted to see what it would be like. So as an experiment, I said, hey, I need this amount of money. I'll give you this much Bitcoin. I'll over collateralize it like 3 times. Their loan to value was about 40. And guess what? The interest rate at the end of that discussion came out to about 14%. Most of them are 12 to 14%. This is a line of credit on your Bitcoin. That's unacceptable. That's not the way it should be. Why is it then? The reason is this. Those institutions are having to go outside of their own bank, if you will, their holdings. They're not self-funded to do this. They are marketing this out to somebody. And if you realize that when you approach someone with a product like this and they say, well, I'm going to be using a secondary, like a market maker who will be holding this, that means you just created soft rehypothecation. It's not acceptable right now. So what I'm saying is that this world's coming. It's right on the cusp. And I think within 2 to 3 years, we'll see these kind of products come on the market that will allow you to say, like, let's just say, Brandon, if you had a lot of Bitcoin and you said you just wanted $50,000 to kind of party this year, go do something, maybe go vacation, have fun, I don't know, live on an island somewhere and go scuba diving for a week or maybe a month, maybe just the whole year. Well, guess what? If you could get a loan and it only cost you 4% that year, and you held your Bitcoin in storage, what would you want to do? You'd say, hey, guess what? I really like that product. I think I'll make it go out for about 5 or 6 years. Will you do that? And then the next thing you know, you would pay off that loan early if you wanted. You'd have all your Bitcoin in place, and you'd actually be making money. That's the concept. And I do believe that world's coming. It's just not here yet. And people, once again, you just got to be patient. So what's that mean? Fall back to the first principle of what we were talking about today. What do you got to do? Just got to stack Bitcoin like a smart psychopath. And then you hold the Bitcoin. You're set there. Just be patient.
So I want to talk the Sailor Gold Rush in the next 10 years, but also it could be 20 years, call it 50 years, 100 years even. Like what are your thoughts on the total addressable market? So we've talked some of the short-term stuff, and again, even medium term, we can touch on that. Again, the Sailor Gold Rush this next 10 years until 99% of the supply is mined of Bitcoin. But you have like a Jeff Booth says, hey, it's money. So it has to account for every single dollar. We talked about the 900 trillion. So coming back kind of full circle, this 1 quadrillion total asset. So it's got to account for every dollar in the system. So that's 900 trillion. We're at 2 trillion now. And then you have a Jack Mallers who's at 450. It's 1/2 of every transaction. And then there's a lot of people under that. You've got a Peter Dunworth who's way above that, multiples of 1 quadrillion, right? Where do you fall on that spectrum when you kind of zoom out into your macro vision? Where do you see the total addressable market for Bitcoin being?
I love Peter Dunworth. I mean, I'm a Bitcoin permabull. I mean, I've got balls the size of watermelons. And, he's probably the only guy that, well, him and Samson Mao, both of those guys are probably bigger
Yeah,
bulls than
Samson-
I am.
Samson Peter.
But that's
Oh,
about it.
man.
I'm right up there with them. I'm just a little slower. I don't think anybody can answer that question definitively. And I disagree with Jeff Booth on that. I see that in a world that could be, 100, 200 years out in the future.
Mhm.
I mean, just for me, and he could be right. Guy's very smart, a lot smarter than Jethro. But I do think that if you just look at the addressable market, you know what? Instead of trying to quantify this by numbers, the way to look at it is this. We have had over 50 years now of a fiat experiment since 1971. And I was there, by the way. I remember it very well. We've had an experiment now with fiat-derived currency. And over that period of time, along with the Triffin dilemma, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the misallocation of capital from that, what have we seen? We have seen money on this planet misallocated into everything you can imagine. Why is real estate a bank?
Mm-hmm.
Why is real estate not just a fucking house? Why is it a bank? Who came up with that idea? Well, you know what? It's broken money that's misallocated. Well, how much would you take out of this system? For instance, right now there's 22, $23 trillion in gold. And I will tell you right now, that is a rock that's not going to ever be able to participate in the global network for final settlement. We've done it in the past. Did you know after World War I, all the central banks that had gone on to fiat-derived currencies that had dropped the gold standard or the bimetallic, they all wanted to get back to gold or bimetallic. They all wanted to get back to metal. And they couldn't do it, especially England. They'd printed so much damn money that they couldn't get back into that standard. Do you know how that they, during that period in the 30s, do you know how they used to designate who had which gold, like in the vaults of London? In those vaults down there, because of the war, much of the gold had been shipped offshore and it was underground in London. You know how they did it? Have you ever seen a gold cart move gold around?
Mm-hmm.
It's the most stupid looking contraption, and it's got these big metal wheels on it. Why? Because gold weighs a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And how they would designate, okay, France just took possession of gold from Germany, is they'd go down in the vault. And I'm not making this up. And they'd put the damn gold on the thing and move it over to another section of the wall. And they often had note cards tagged on top of these damn piles. You can't trust gold. No country in the world. I don't care. You think you'll ever trust Russia if they tell you they have this amount of gold in their? Never. Nobody's ever going to trust them. Gold is going to be flipped. So what's that? Is how much of that 22 or $23 trillion is misallocated? Central banks have been stacking golds like psychopaths since 22 after the invasion of Ukraine. Why? Because they saw the writing on the wall after we seized assets. There's about $24 trillion in art, collectibles, cars. You know what a pain in the ass it is to keep a car to try and store value in? I mean, the counterparty risk to it is incredible. And it could just be a stray cat getting inside the garage and climbing all over your damn car. And the cost of maintaining a car is impossible nowadays. There's less mechanics, less people working in that industry, and it's getting less all the time. The costs are raising astronomically. Real estate, how much of that is misallocated? How many people have got 2 or 3 houses? How many of the ultra wealthy have got 10 houses and they don't live in a damn one of them? What are they doing? Because of misallocated capital, that money needs to go somewhere. Everybody is running around 15 trillion in Japan. They're all trying to preserve wealth or beat debasement. So how much of that $1,000 trillion, how much of it is misallocated? How much of it should come into Bitcoin? I can't answer it other than to say that if we have sound money, you're going to see those balloons collapse. There's going to be a pinprick, and that money will flow into Bitcoin, the hardest asset on earth. And that'll be a great day for a lot of the planet, in my mind.
What happens in your mind? So inevitably the question, we're talking about total addressable market, like you said, and you explained that so well. Part of the misunderstanding, or I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, is, you have to, the only way you can really even talk about it in essence is saying, hey, in today's purchasing power, today's dollars. And you talked about, obviously, the Weimar Republic obviously is one of like the famous ones. Obviously people always use, sound money advocates use for probably one of the last big times where there's this revaluation, or the currency trying to revalue itself on a gold standard. We saw what happened there, obviously. And so what happens when dollars don't exist? Because at some point there's probably no bid, right? Like, we talk about these grandiose numbers and everyone says, live on 0.1 Bitcoin, or, which will be the way the future in essence. But talking about $43 million Bitcoin, or $100 million, or $1 billion Bitcoin, in my mind is nonsensical, because at some point, someone somewhere it goes no bid, right? The price goes to infinity in dollars, because we've printed so much of it, that people aren't accepting dollars for Bitcoin anymore, or that, they won't take the trash tokens, the dollar trash tokens anymore. So what happens? Like, what does that world look like for someone that's just getting into this again? And maybe this is the first time they're hearing this. A lot of people think that you have to have the dollar with Bitcoin. Like, if Bitcoin won't be around, it won't exist if we don't have the dollar. So good luck. How are you going to price your Bitcoin? So I'd love for you just to touch on that for a minute, of what that world looks like when people aren't accepting dollars, they don't exist, or something to that effect.
A bifurcated world, a world of, I probably, some people are going to not be happy with what I have to say, but I think the dollar is not going to go anywhere for a long time. I think the dollar is going to be what it is right now for decades. And I just look at history. I look at the decline of nation states. I do look at the decline of global reserve currencies, such as the Spanish. And I look at it and I see that even as the nations went into decline, even as they fell and they were no longer the world's superpower, and I've got air quotes here, but that currency continued for a long time. It had legs. I think the US dollar has got tremendous legs. I don't think it's going to go anywhere for a long time. And if you really want a nice world transition as we go through this very difficult period over the next 3 years, if you want to see us come out on the other side in maybe a land of abundance and peace, then we really want to have some kind of a stable currency. And I believe personally, it's going to be the dollar. And so what's that mean for Bitcoin? Why am I so pumped on Bitcoin? Because I'm not saying that the dollar itself is not going to become like some colored confetti about as much worth as wampum beads, because it is going to be debased tremendously. We are going to print the living shit out of the dollar here over the next 10 years. There is no other way. How we get out of this is we either default, and we're not going to default. That's not going to happen. We print our way out, and there is another alternative, and it doesn't get discussed much, but we could actually grow our way out of this crisis. I'd have to say the biggest promise to AI and robotics going forward is this opportunity for us to live in this world of abundance. And that won't change, though, the price of those cuckbucks. It will not change that devalue that's coming. If you hold sovereign bonds, if you hold U.S. treasuries or bonds, or I should say bonds, anything long-term past the 10-year, you're going to have your ass handed to you. Basically, since the 40-year secular bull market has ended in bonds, you've already had your ass handed to you. And it's not going to get better. But I think the way to frame this is to bring it back to what we talked about before, which is, what can you buy? What is the purchasing power of what you can own and buy? That's the way to look at this. Mm-hmm. And you can prove it. I've said this before. I'll just really quickly do this again. 8 years ago, 666 Bitcoin to buy my house in my neighborhood, the average house. Mark of the devil, by the way, 666. And 4 years before that, it was 44 Bitcoin. Today, Oh shit. It's actually a little bit less. Even today, it could be like 4.5 Bitcoin. That's incredible.
It's wild.
So that's what I'm talking about. That's what you need to do. That's why we're here. That's why you should be stacking your Bitcoin like a psychopath, because that is what you're trying to do. You want to preserve that purchasing power. What do you think all these other people out there in that market I talked about, that $1,000 trillion market, what do you think they're trying to do? Why do they own those stupid cars and garages and multiple houses and every other kind of crap that you can think of? They're just trying to store their wealth. Well, you don't need to just store your wealth. I mean, you can actually become wealthy. You can have so much wealth in the future going forward that you can step outside that system permanently. But I do think that those dollar rails, are going to exist for a long time.
You kind of just touch on, the four phases of money, really, right? Collectible, and then store of value. Yeah. And then medium exchange, unit of account. It makes me think of Jack Dorsey. He's a very polarizing figure, obviously, and everyone's got their thoughts, but again, he's pushing forward the Bitcoin system. So I'll give him that. He's doing a lot there, but he's been really pushing and you mentioned Block earlier. This is also what made me think of this, all tying this together, is he's really been pushing the P2P, peer-to-peer cash system, right? The white paper is right there, electronic cash, peer-to-peer. And he's famous for, somewhat recently saying, hey, if this doesn't turn into a medium exchange or a peer-to-peer cash, then Bitcoin's failed. Now, like you said, again, the average person is like having to live in these different worlds, and Bitcoiners do too. They live in fiat world and the Bitcoin world, where you're using Bitcoin as an investment, as a savings technology, as a store of value. And then we're trying to transition it to eventually someday, like you said, being a medium exchange and a unit of account. So I would love your thoughts on this. I guess just maybe the stair stepping, or like how it kind of goes through these phases. And I'm sure this is Jack trying to just kind of push that narrative of business owners accepting it, people using it more, and obviously his companies benefit from that and the things he's doing, which is great. So I would love your quick thoughts on this and kind of where we're at in that in those cycles.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up. This is a great topic to talk about, because I can see that from my past statements here in this podcast that people might think that you don't use Bitcoin, that you never spend Bitcoin. Then you stack Bitcoin like a psychopath and you just keep the thing. Well, that isn't actually how I work in the world, because I do spend Bitcoin, and I do believe in Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. But what I do is, and I'm using the Aqua wallet, what I'll do is I just transfer money into the Aqua wallet and then I spend it. When I was over in Prague, I put money in the wallet, I spend it. First off, that takes care of all my capital gains concerns, because there's no capital gain. I get it, I spend it. It also keeps the base layer going, because most of the time I ask for the transmission to go on the base layer instead of Lightning. Right now, transactions are down inside the block. So like when I was over there, I put in money into the wallet, and I hired a model. She and I went around Prague, and I've got some different images of her, and I'm working on that now. But I paid her in Bitcoin, and although she kind of hesitated at first about getting it on the base layer, she was good with it. I sent it, it went through. So I believe in spending Bitcoin. Bitcoin is money. You can spend it. What I'm talking about when I say holding Bitcoin is I have Bitcoin that it's not getting out of my fist. I mean, I've worked my ass off to get it. I've sweated, I've traded, I've took money out of my system, poured it into there. I laid awake in bed at 3 a.m, wondering what the fuck I had done when it was down like 80%. And you know what? That's money that I've worked and sweated for. It's not mine. That's my store of wealth. That's not my medium of exchange. So you can think of this in both ways. It's not a dichotomy that you can't square. I mean, if you're a Bitcoiner, you should be able to hold two thoughts inside your head at the same time. It's not that damn hard.
Yep.
But in the future, unless we can get that fixed, unless we can get the capital gains issue just fixed here in the U.S., it's going to be a block that we are going to have difficulty getting past. And so I'm not sure how to answer the question other than to say Bitcoin can be both things at once. Obviously, it's not a unit of account yet for the world. There is a very good chance that the rest of the world is going to still be sitting on this thing as the rest of us are stacking, holding, and increasing our wealth. And at some point, those people are going to look around and, they're probably not going to be very happy. I do also think that there will be a point when there's going to be a tremendous amount of populist pushback against Bitcoiners. One of those situations where basically they're going to say, hey, you know what? You were just lucky. You had it easy. You got in early. And anybody who's held Bitcoin for any length of time knows that that's not true. You work to hold your Bitcoin, and you work to understand it, and you work to acquire more. But that won't mean anything to these people. And if I'm right that the majority of people are not going to be onboarded into Bitcoin going forward, at some point we're going to have to deal with that. Something I want to, and this will get a little bit off track, but something I want to talk about there is, I think it's very, very important. I have Bitcoin held in many different buckets, including ETFs, 401k, a lot of different buckets. But I also hold Bitcoin in cold storage. And I cannot think of anything more important as a Bitcoiner than to hold your wealth in cold storage. And someday going forward, it may be the only lifeline you have when people are coming after you with pitchforks. So just file that away, fellow pleb.
Boy, is so incredibly well said, George. I was just thinking, you're making me think of just like, what's the number one thing, parting thoughts you could say to someone to avoiding collapse, beating inflation, stuff like that. I mean, we work with Stampseed, learning how to custody. We work with the Bitcoin Way here too. Tony Asbeck's an unbelievable guy, his team. It's like, learn how to custody, running a node, being part of the system and running the system, putting your seed phrase in titanium, like storing, like you said, it could be your only lifeline for all of that. So I would love your last thoughts on any of this, maybe last thoughts in general to avoid this debasement that we've been dealing with for 112 years since 1913. Just whatever kind of comes to your head, just any last thoughts on all the things we've been talking about.
Well, I have something I want to talk about before we leave here. And I've been holding this in my mind because I want to discuss this. If we want Bitcoin to be here, if we want it to be that life raft that we think it is, if we want us to have that escape pod, if we want to be able to get outside this system, Bitcoin has to succeed. There are some people that think Bitcoin is going to succeed all on its own, that you can't kill Bitcoin, that it is impervious, that we've already won the war. I've said that. We have won the war, but that doesn't mean Bitcoin is going to continue unless we support it. If Bitcoin is up at $120,000, every one of you out there that hold any amount of Bitcoin have had your wealth increased tremendously. So you have to give back, and you need to run a node. And you can use Sats9, MyNode. There are a lot of companies that provide nodes that are basically plug and play for people like myself who don't want to dick around with it. I just want to plug an Ethernet cable in, plug the unit in, and I want the node to sync to the network. And then I have a node that I can then run my Sparrow software with, and my Cold Card or whatever the hell, not Ledger, Jesus, any other hardware wallet you're using, so that you can interact with the blockchain, because you must have a node to interact with the blockchain. Why is this important? If you are new to Bitcoin, you need to review what we call the block size wars. You need to study it. You need to find out what it was about and why it was nodes that were the ultimate vote of power, that the nodes, the plebs, people like myself and you, we are the ones who saved Bitcoin from what I think would have been a wrong fork. I think if we'd have gone down the road of big blocks, Bitcoin would have ended. The other thing is, and you'll have to do your own research on this because it's complicated, but I don't run Bitcoin Core. Core is often the default for the software protocol on your node. I run something called NOTs. The reason I say it's a complicated subject is because NOTs basically is Bitcoin Core, but it just has some filters on it to keep spam off the network. What did I say earlier when we were talking? Bitcoin is money. peer-to-peer electronic cash. That's what it is. It's not some place to store your fucking JPEG or any other thing on there. And you have a responsibility to make that not happen as a node runner. You know, why am I so adamant about that? Because it's ethically and morally wrong to do that. Every time you put some shit on the Bitcoin blockchain, you are burdening a future generation without their permission. If you sync a node right now, like I did recently, it goes fine. It's fast, you know. And guess what? I had to get a bigger node with more memory than I would have 5 years ago. In 10 years, you're going to need a lot bigger node with more memory. It's going to cost more. Why? Because people are putting crap on it. When you sync it and it gets to 2023, boom, everything's going fast. It gets there. It's like it hits a wall. And you think, oh my God, I'm going to be synced up in 3 days here. And then it hits that and it just starts crawling. Why? Because when those jackasses showed up with their JPEGs, Taproot protocol was implemented. Well, I don't even want to mention names here, but these people flooded the system with their crap. And prior to 2023, the Bitcoin community, node runners like myself and you and people like us, we were hardcore. We didn't want to put up with that shit. And it used to be that filters were in place to stop spam on the network. We were committed to it. And that has fallen by the wayside. So you need to run a node. You need to decide what kind of software you're going to run on it. And you should make a decision in your mind what it is that's important. The last thing I'll say is you should be mining some Bitcoin. I don't even care if it's a little bit axe like that one on the painting back there behind my shoulder. You should be running something and send that hash rate to some mining pool that is morally and ethically aligned with you as a Bitcoiner. Don't be sending that damn thing to Foundry. They've got like 36% of the network right now in hash rate. Antpool. If you take Antpool and you total all the other mining pools that are associated with Chinese control, they've got like 65% of the network right now. If that doesn't scare you as a Bitcoiner, then it should. So you have a responsibility. And the last thing I'll say to you is, you know what? If you'll do that, we'll win here. Bitcoin will stay strong, and I will meet you on the other side.
Community is the number one most important thing in a survival situation. And newsflash, you're human, so you're in a survival situation. October 10th through the 13th is your island retreat. Camp Nakamoto, brought to you by Mass Adoption. I will be speaking there. Nellie Brunel, Mark Moss, Larry Lepard, David Foley, James Lavish, BJ Dichter, Luke Broyles, Michelle Weekly, and many more will be there to have fun. Lots of games, activities, Cattleman's Feast, crab bakes. There's going to be everything you can imagine as a beautiful part of Northern New Hampshire. We look forward to seeing you there for 15% off tickets. Gentile 15, Gentile 15, Gentile 15. There's only a couple dozen remaining out of the 100 plus that were available, so get them now. The very next week, October 16th through 18th, will be the Canadian Bitcoin Conference. This is an awesome conference, Bitcoin only as well. The Rialto Theater in Montreal, Quebec. The inaugural Canada versus USA Bitcoin hockey game was won by our team, the good guys, last year. So we'll be playing again on that Thursday, having 2 incredible days, Friday and Saturday. We're going to have unbelievable speakers there. Francis Pouliot, Larry Lepard, myself. We're going to have Jeff Walton. We're going to have Tomer Strolight, Brad Mills, Adam O'Brien from Bitcoin Well. It's going to be an absolutely incredible time. So check that out here, the link as well. And we'll share it in the description, just like everything else. We cannot wait for our family to meet yours the 10th through the 13th and the 16th through the 18th in Northern New Hampshire and Quebec. We'll see you there.
That's I think there's a massive reason. I'm really glad we talked about this at the end, because I'm going to clip this too, and put it out there just in general over the next week or two as well, just because, there's a reason Satoshi was anonymous and left. People think it's NSA and this and that. I mean, and again, could it be? Yeah, it could. The great part about it doesn't matter. That's number one. It doesn't matter. That's the beauty of it. Now, at the same time, it could have been a guy, gal, or group, and there's a reason they were anonymous, and there's a reason they left. This is not stuff you F around with. This is military grade encryption, sly roundabout way. You're stripping money from the state. We fought separation of church and state, and there was a huge war here, if anyone didn't know that, in America 250 years ago. So this isn't something you F around with. And I think that we've lost the plot, many people, of what this is actually for and what's actually being fought for. And I'm just very glad that you talked about that and then this. And this, I know Matthew Kratter's done a lot of great education on this. The Ocean guys, I just had Ian Northen, the chief legal counsel of Ocean, on recently in the last couple of weeks. He's one of the smartest guys I've seen in the space. Incredible guy. Mechanic. I mean, there's so many people. Mark over there, Bob Burnett, one of your good buddies. So this is, running a node, like you said, and, voting with your wallet, voting with your feet, voting with your node, voting with your mouth, your actual vote. And then there's the ammo box too, but that's the last of the options, obviously, right? And that's like Thomas Paine's common sense. That was the last option, and all else failed. We don't want to get to that point, as George is saying. We do not want to get there. Stop it now before things get out of control.
Well said, Brandon. I'm glad we had a chance to talk, and I know I ranted a couple times, but you know what? I'm at a point right now, I really don't care anymore. I'm going to say what I say and just let it fall.
Well, I love you, Jethro. We need many more like you in the space. I thank you so much, and we're in the trenches together, or the cockpit. So appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Brandon. You have a great day, partner.
You too.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.